Good morning, buenos dias, Washington, D.C. My name is Tomas Talamante, and I'm Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Muriel Bowser. We want to thank you for joining us for Mayor Bowser's second Budget Engagement Forum, and I am honored to serve as your host. I want to remind everyone now that you can go to budget.dc.gov to start participating with us virtually. We have some survey questions on there, including where you can let us know which ward you're participating from. We can already see we have representation from all 8 wards joining us today. I also want to remind at any time you can dial 844-881-1314. It's on the bottom of your screen as well, to ask your budget questions of Mayor Bowser. You can dial that number now and press 0, and at any time you'll be able to ask your questions throughout the program. So again, go to budget.dc.gov now or dial 884-881-1314 now to be able to start asking your questions. So we are excited to hear from Mayor Bowser, the budget team, as well as our deputy mayors when we do the virtual version of our $100 game a little bit later in the program. But to get us started, we're going to go to Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Good morning, DC. It's wonderful to be with you at our second citywide budget engagement forum. I've said frequently, and I'll say again today, that my experience in building a budget, both as a council member and now as your mayor, has been to get feedback as soon as possible from the community so that when I hear the recommendations from my deputy mayors and agency directors, I've also heard the recommendations of the community. I've also learned very early on that the budget can be complicated. Some of the terms that we use are unfamiliar, and even the schedule may be unfamiliar. So we use these sessions to educate you about how we build our budget and to talk about our priority areas, the things that worked, the things that we think we can build on, but most important, to hear directly from you what you need for your communities, for your family, and for yourself. This is our opportunity to hear from you about the district's budget impacts on your life, how it impacts you directly, and how it impacts your family directly. And by hearing from you, we can build a budget that works for all of DC, for all of our residents, and for all of our communities. Certainly, this is an important budget season as we look both to relieve the stresses of COVID-19, but also to build for a better and stronger future for DC post-COVID. So we look forward to hearing from you today. I'm joined by members of my administration who are going to tell you exactly what they do to make the district a better place to live and work and to do business. And we're going to start with the city administrator and the budget director, who will talk to you about how we build our budget, some of the investments that we made last year, how they've worked. And then we're also going to hear from the deputy mayors from the district who lead a cluster of agencies about how our district is organized. They represent clusters that affect schools, economic development, infrastructure, human services, public safety, and city services, and everything that it takes the district government to work. So we look forward to hearing from you today. And I also want to thank, before we move forward, all of the 37,000 employees of DC government who have turned on a dime to make sure that our government, our services can continue to operate during this unprecedented pandemic. So with that, I want to turn to Kevin Donahue, who I recently appointed as the city administrator for the district. Kevin has served as the deputy city administrator throughout my term, and he will be also joined by Jenny Reed, who is the budget director for the district, who has served throughout my tenure as mayor. Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning. My name is Kevin. I'm the city administrator, and what Jenny and I will do is provide some context about the budget. So this is my 7th budget engagement forum, and I can tell you with firsthand experience that we use your feedback to help shape the budget that reflects how we allocate your resources for our city. And the context is important because it will help you think about the timing of why we do these now and the windows that you have to advocate for what you think is important. Jenny will spend time talking about the process of the budget and its overall composition. Then what I'll do is I'll talk about how different policy clusters and issues manifest themselves in different parts of the budget. Then you can hear from the deputy mayors with that sense of context and understanding about how the process works. Jenny?
Thank you, City Administrator, and good morning, Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jenny Reed, and I am Mayor Bowser's Budget Director. I want to talk to you a little bit about our budget process and how our schedule works to deliver our budget. So we are always excited to kick off the annual budget process each year with the most important part, hearing directly from you about what your priorities are for the upcoming year. We also use those ideas and we work with our agencies and our deputy mayors to put together recommendations for Mayor Bowser for her to submit her budget to the DC Council. That will happen later this spring. Then the DC Council takes 60 days to review the mayor's budget. This is another opportunity for you to provide your input as they host hearings for every single agency, and you can go down to testify and tell the DC Council what important investments you want to maintain in the district's budget. After that, the budget gets submitted to Congress, a step we won't have to do once we become the 51st state. After it is reviewed by Congress, we then turn to the important step of implementing the budget. So we begin to deliver on the programs and services that you told us were a priority. And that's where my office also comes back into play, because we not only work to develop the budget, but we also look at how well agencies are performing those programs and services that you care about. And we use data and evidence to make sure that we deliver on our commitments. We then close out the process by taking a look back and seeing at how well we did. We produce the Mayor's Accountability Report, our performance oversight reports, and we deliver those to Council and to the public, and then talk to you about how well we did. And then finally, we close with our audit, our certified annual financial report, that tells us how well we did at spending our dollars every year. And then we start all over again. So we're very excited to be here today to get your input. I want to talk to you a little bit about how the budget is put together. So there's two main components to our budget: an operating budget that funds things like salaries for public school teachers and programs and services at recreation centers. That's just under $17 billion. Now that seems like a lot, but one thing I do want to point out is that this is $1.5 billion less than the previous year because the pandemic resulted in a big drop in our revenues. That is made up of local funds generated by local tax dollars and fees and fines, as well as federal grants that come to us just like every other state. We also have what's called a capital budget. That's $1.7 billion for this current fiscal year. The capital budget is really important because it helps us build the critical infrastructure in DC that we use every day. So for example, it helps us modernize our schools, build new recreation centers and libraries, and also make sure our roads, sidewalks, and alleys are in a state of good repair. Later on, you're going to tell us how you think we should best allocate our resources to meet your priorities. And before you do that, we want to just give you a little bit of an idea of how our budget is currently allocated. The largest share of our budget, just over $5 billion, goes to support human support services. These areas perform critical functions like providing Medicaid and Medicare for residents, as well as homeless services. Our next big share goes to education. So more than $3 billion goes to public education to help provide services to our public school children, as well as to like the DC Library and the Parks and Recreation Center. A little over $4.5 billion is what's in our enterprise financing and other fund. What that is a lot of it is the debt service that goes to help build our recreation centers and our libraries, but it also is funds that the district holds and then passes directly through to other agencies like DC Water and the University of the District of Columbia. A little over $2 billion goes to our Public Works and Government Operations division. This, for example, funds our Department of Public Works that comes and picks up your trash every week. It also funds agencies like the Office of the Chief Technology Officer that helps make sure we can all work safely from home. We also have just under $2 billion for our Public Safety and Justice Cluster. This includes our Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department, our Office of Unified Communications that helps answer your 911 and 311 calls, and our Office of Neighborhood and Safety Engagement. And then last, but certainly not least, we also have funding for our Economic Development and Regulation Administration. And this includes important functions like the Department of Housing and Community Development that helps build our affordable housing. So now I'm going to turn it back to City Administrator Donahue to talk to you a little bit about some specific investments we're making this year.
Thank you, Jenny. It's really hard to talk about anything that we've done the past year without talking about the pandemic. So when we were with you last year, if you joined us last year, we were in big rooms with hundreds of people. We now sit with you in the auditorium of the convention center. When we talked to you last year, we already had our first case of COVID-19 in DC, but it hadn't taken over our country and our world the way it did just a few weeks later. And in the budget that we compiled and we talked about, there were not the buckets for the large resources that we were ultimately going to spend on our response. So over the course of the year, we spent an extraordinary amount trying to keep the city safe, its residents and workers safe. On things that we didn't really envision when we began the process in the fall of 2019. Those are like PPE, contact tracers, free public testing, supporting reopening, and then fortunately now supporting mass vaccinations as we roll those out. All of these programs were allowable in part because we had federal resources, and in part because the city was prudent with its resources over the years in building up emergency reserves that allowed us to tap into those to be able to pay for services that weren't covered by the federal government. Some of those you see on the slide that go beyond what you traditionally think of as a COVID response, that really deal with trying to handle the ripple effects in the community of the pandemic in all of its forms. That included providing an extraordinary, unprecedented amount of unemployment benefits, providing emergency grocery services and distribution to our senior citizens and those who are homebound. It includes child care grants to have child care centers be able to make it back through when we were in phase 1 and full closure to now being reopened. Rental support and mortgage support for those who are in financial need, and also assistance to our small businesses who employ many thousands of people in DC, but had to close down because of the pandemic. These weren't an area that we asked your feedback for last year, but are very much part of what we do every day, and part of the budget that's both woven within individual agencies and exists in part of our buckets of federal and local dollars that we spend for a COVID response. Now, if you look to the next slide here, you'll see the 6 more traditional areas that we have. You're going to hear from a deputy mayor who's going to talk about each one. Now, keep in mind these 6 areas aren't divided equally in the share of the budget that they take up. Education and health and human services alone combine to be about half our budget. So as you listen to deputy mayors, we want your thoughts, your questions, and most importantly, your feedback about how you think we should divide up those dollars.
So again, we are about to begin the next portion of our program where you're going to hear directly from our deputy mayors. You can go to budget.dc.gov right now to start preparing to fill out your $100 game, the virtual version of our $100 game, and fill out your allocations. The deputy mayors are going to shortly give you their pitches on why they think you should allocate more of your $100 towards their clusters. So we have a full program still ahead of us. We're very excited. Fill up your coffee. Go to budget.dc.gov now and start to get ready to fill out your $100 game. We also want to remind you, you can dial 844-881-1314 and press 0 to ask your questions of the mayor. We're going to get to the Q&A portion program here shortly. So again, the number is on your screen. We hope you'll dial in now and ask us your questions. So to get us started with the deputy mayor pitches, we're going to go to Deputy Mayor for Education, Paul Kine.
Thank you, Tomas, and good morning, Washington, D.C. My name is Paul Kine, and I am Mayor Bowser's Deputy Mayor for Education. Across the education cluster, we have experienced a year like no other. Overnight, we turned our entire public school system virtual. And thanks to the perseverance and innovation and caring of our teachers and staff and administrators, and of course, our families and students, I am very proud to say that teaching and learning continued in every corner of Washington, D.C. Now, we are facing unprecedented challenges. A third of our child care centers remain closed. Months and months of learning is being lost. And far too many of our neighbors and our residents are jobless. And these are not problems we're going to solve quickly. We cannot find fixes overnight. But we are lucky to be starting from a very strong foundation. We have experienced years and years of dramatic improvements in our public schools, and years of strong investments by Mayor Bowser. In fiscal 21, this current year, as you can see from the slide, the mayor's budget included a full 3% increase in the uniform per student funding formula despite unprecedented financial challenges. That led to a $1.92 billion budget for our schools. It also included $21.8 million for the essential expansion of mental health services in schools. And it included $1.5 billion for the ongoing renovation and modernization of our school buildings. Now, the budget we're here to talk about this morning, our future budget, is really about building from this strong foundation on a road to recovery. And I don't mean just for next year. I mean for future years as we build new systems that are grounded in equity. And maybe the way we should all think about measuring our success is ensuring a wonderful childhood for every young person in Washington, D.C. This would mean excellent early childhood education for all young people. So we've got to continue to invest in strengthening and sustaining our early childhood sector. This would mean vital new supports for schools to ensure that we continue to expand our mental health services, to ensure that every young person that really needs it gets high-intensity tutoring, and expansion of our credit recovery program so that our high schoolers stay on track. But I don't just mean in schools. Ensuring a wonderful childhood now requires establishing innovative new partnerships so that together we flood the city with learning and supports for our kids. Partnerships with parks and camps and the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program. Partnerships with our community organizations and out of school time. And partnerships with our businesses and our philanthropies. Of course, great childhoods also mean having caregivers and parents who have family-sustaining jobs. So we must continue to invest in the intensive supports that residents need in order to find work. We've got to make sure we grow our access to high-quality training, like the DC Infrastructure Academy. We've got to sustain the important work of UDC, and these ways ensure that more families, as the mayor says, are on pathways to the middle class. And lastly, of course, wonderful childhoods are about fun. So we must continue to invest in our camps so that we continue our summer recreation and learning, in our parks and our rec centers for play, and in our beautiful libraries for exploration and discovery. So as you consider the pitches tonight from me and my colleagues, I want you to please remember that we are all in this together, and together we can create exceptional childhood for every young person in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We are going to go next to the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, Wayne Turnage.
Good morning, everyone. In the brief time that I have allotted, I will offer 3 reasons that I would like you to consider as you contemplate the allocation of your $100 for the mayor's budget. First, I'll ask you to focus on the fact that nearly every agency in the Health and Human Services cluster provides service to some of the most vulnerable residents in the District of Columbia. We're talking about residents who are medically fragile due to a high level of uncontrolled disease. We're talking about residents who live with severe intellectual disabilities. We're talking about residents who struggle with both moderate and severe mental health and substance use disorders. Those who also live on the economic margin, forced to live on wages that are not much more than subsistence level. We're talking about residents who are consigned to shelters or worse, who live outdoors in tent encampments. And we're talking about those residents who, despite the importance of health care, do not make enough money to pay the high premium costs for private health insurance. So that's the first reason. We're dealing with some of the most vulnerable residents in the city. Second, I ask you to focus on the importance of the services that we offer to those residents. And many are life-saving, vital supports that these residents so desperately need to escape situations that are unhealthy and often dangerous. For example, we provide meal delivery for seniors, often in times of shut-in, so that they will have sufficient nutrition. We provide behavioral health services to persons who are on a downward spiral due to mental illness and sometimes caught in the tragic and very dangerous process of drug addiction. We provide health care insurance to 4 in 10 district residents at a cost of over $3 billion. And we provide income supports for those who are looking for a hand up. And finally, if you think about the importance of health care overall, we've just allocated over $400 million to build an integrated healthcare system for wards 7 and 8, areas that have been largely forgotten by the private market's allocation of healthcare resources. These examples offer some significant insight into the scope of the mayor's commitment in the Health and Human Services cluster to persons who live truly at risk in an otherwise quite prosperous city. Third, I close by noting that the DC Department of Health is the agency charged with leading the district's public health response for the worst pandemic this country has seen in more than 100 years. As a part of the mayor's whole of government approach, DC Health skillfully directs our COVID testing efforts, our disease surveillance, and the city's vaccination program. This agency has taken on an enormous challenge of directing these important activities while maintaining its day-to-day focus on the many population health activities that are designed to improve health outcomes for all DC residents. So as you move forward, much of what we learned thus far will be incorporated in the mayor's efforts going forward. So to ensure that we are successful, I ask that you favorably consider HHS in these changes as you allocate your $100. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We are going to go next to Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Chris Geldhart.
Good morning to everybody that's logged on today to take part in this very important process for our city. And I want to say thank you for doing that. My name is Chris Geldhart. I am your Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. And I'd like to talk about my cluster in terms of what we faced in the year that we've just gone through and what we're going to continue to face in the year as we go forward. There are 3 major impacts that our city and all of us have gone through in the last year where your public safety agencies have had a major role. First and foremost, as mentioned by 2 of my colleagues here, is our global pandemic. Your public safety agencies during that global pandemic made it so that our city services, all of the agencies that we'll talk about today, could be coordinated and organized and provide what I believe was one of the best responses to a pandemic, to this pandemic in our country. Your emergency management agency brought together all the agencies here into an emergency operations center and throughout the city as we rolled out the things like our ability to do medical surge, our ability to do good testing for all those that wanted to get tested, a good process that we could have in place for tracing and for executing what we're now doing in our ability to vaccinate throughout the city. So your public safety entities were there for you throughout that. The second major thing that we saw this year that continues was a racial justice and equity movement throughout our nation and our city here. And that what we have done from the beginning of that and through with the multiple agencies that were out there that helped to make sure that those that wanted to come and have their voice heard could be heard and could do what they needed to do to make sure that this important issue was raised and it was raised in the right way. We're also looking from that going forward for this year, how we can better utilize our 911 service through our Office of Unified Communications to better direct calls to agencies that may be able to respond to things other than police. That is an effort that we'll be looking for this year. Third, our gun violence epidemic that we've seen in the city. Our mayor has called that out as a major public health problem that we have in this city, a crisis. And as we look at standing up our Gun Violence Emergency Operations Center and doing all the work we need to do to stem that gun violence in the city, the need for us to increase our supports for those that are doing violence interruption, those that are providing trauma services to the folks out in our communities, to our services that go towards those that have been impacted, and how do we get them on off-ramps out of those areas where gun violence may be what they believe the only option. So I wrap up by saying to you all, with all of these things I just mentioned, they take resources. And as you're looking at your $100 investment for today, I ask that you remember that your public safety entities are the ones that are there for you when you need them the most, and that you invest that $100 wisely with your public safety entities. Thank you.
Up next, Deputy Mayor for Operations and Infrastructure, Lucinda Babers.
I'm Lucinda, and I represent transportation, infrastructure, and the environment. And I know a lot of you all do not think that we need any more money in our budget, and you want to give it to housing, and you wanted to give it to healthcare, and you want to give it to education. But I need $5 to take care of them. So I need $25 total. And come on, walk with me. And let me share with you how we support all of the rest of the clusters here. You got education. So little Johnny, when you send little Johnny out your front door on his way to school, know that the sidewalk that he walks on, transportation and infrastructure. The road, the protected bike lanes that he rides on, transportation and infrastructure. And so we want to get Johnny safely to school, but that means I need some of education's money. And kids ride free, the mayor has indicated. Absolutely. We support kids ride free so that little Johnny can take Metro Rail and Metro Bus. Now come, walk a little further. So we have Health and Human Services. You all heard the city administrator say they have the biggest budget. So come on, give me $5 of that budget. Because guess what? When little Johnny walks out the door, our Department of Energy and Environment is trying to make sure that we have reduced emissions and we have low pollution so that little Johnny's asthma does not increase and get worse, and that he needs the health services. Now, we got housing, economic development, all very important. And so we are on a quest for more affordable housing under Mayor Bowser. But guess what? We can't even build housing if Consumer and Regulatory Affairs does not issue permits, does not do inspections to make sure that that house you buy is safe. And then once you're in that home, you're probably gonna get new furniture. You're gonna need to call bulk trash, Public Works, to come pick up that trash. And then, God forbid, you have a roofing problem. Now you need to delve into your insurance, and you need to find out what are you covered with. Well, that's insurance, securities, and banking. So who are you gonna call? You're gonna call transportation and infrastructure. Internal services. Many of us do not know what these clusters do, but they're vital. You got technology, you have human resources, but you know what? They need to get around the city to do their jobs. And so we license the DC residents in order to drive those vehicles that we also register. So they need to call us. And then, of course, you have public safety. And we know that we've just heard from Deputy Mayor Gildart. And I don't know if you all know, but trees. Little Johnny needs more trees. He needs lighting. He needs intersections and blocks where he can safely walk across the street with Vision Zero. So who are you going to call? That's where you look to us. So I just want to encourage you all to allocate at least $25 of that $100 to transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Up next is Assistant City Administrator Jay Melder.
Thank you, Tomas, and good morning, DC. My name is Jay. I have the great honor of serving as Mayor Bowser's Assistant City Administrator for Internal Services. Little Johnny and the Deputy Mayor is a hard act to follow, but I'm going to do my best to do it. Deputy Mayor Babers indicated, what does Internal Services do? Well, we are the good government support arm of all of the other priorities and clusters here at the table. What we do is make sure that they have the people, the places, and the tools they need to serve you better, to serve you faster, more accurately, and in a nimble way to respond to the many challenges that all of these different agencies are responding to now. What does investments in internal services mean? It's investments in our public buildings and our public spaces. Our beautiful modernized schools, our beautiful modernized government facilities, our rec centers, our short-term family housing facilities in all 8 wards that are assets to the community and things that we can all be proud of. Investments in internal services make sure that those facilities are greener, they're cleaner, and they're safer, and they're what our citizens deserve for Washington, D.C. Investments in internal services and investments in our IT infrastructure, from expanded free public Wi-Fi to the tablets and devices our students and teachers and workers need to continue to learn and teach and work in a virtual environment during this pandemic. It's also enabling you to skip the line at some of the services you need at DC government and do more of your business with us online from the comfort and safety of your own home. Investments in internal services is an investment and a support in 37,000 great careers. We have the best public workforce around, and it's a great place to work and to serve district residents. Many of our employees are district residents, so investments in internal services are investments in those careers. We're also really proud to play a part in economic development and opportunity. From prioritizing new district leases to Wards 7 and 8, where we can bring and be an anchor and a catalyst for more of the amenities that our communities want and need there, to buying the services and supplies that we need for district government to run from the local businesses. Last year, we spent more than $1 billion with certified business enterprises in the district to get the things that we need to serve you better. This year, we've got the goal to do the same. So when you're figuring out where to put your $100, I know internal services is not probably going to be your highest priority. But just know that every dollar you invest in internal services is going to make sure that your investments in all the other priorities go farther, get there faster, and make a bigger impact along the way. We're a force multiplier. So thank you for investing in internal services. We're here to help.
And to close this out with the Deputy Mayor pitches, the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, John Falchicchio.
Hi, everyone. I'm John, and I'm happy to be with you this morning. And as you might know, Mayor Bowser has given DEMPED 3 tasks, creating jobs, creating affordable housing, and increasing our tax revenue. So if you think about this as a math equation, creating jobs and creating affordable housing actually helps us increase our tax revenue. So let me talk about those first 2 a little bit. So the first one is creating affordable housing. There was a study by Howard University just last year, and that study showed that in 2000 to 2018, the District of Columbia built about 40,000 units of housing. Now, what that found in that period between 2000 and 2018 was that if that housing hadn't been built, then the rents in DC would be 5% higher. Now, what Mayor Bowser did in this very hall in 2019, when she started her second term as mayor, she made a goal for the city. The goal is that we create 36,000 new units of housing by 2025, 12,000 of which need to be affordable. And we're going to do that and she made us the first city in the country to have goals for affordable housing by neighborhood. And so when we do that, and if we're successful on that goal, and if we invest in housing today, we'll see that it'll help keep rents 5% lower than they would be without that effort. So I ask you to invest in housing today for those reasons. It actually is an investment in you. Now, you may be thinking, I'm not a renter, so how would investing in housing help me? So we have programs in order to invest in those homes of seniors who've lived in DC for many years and now need an improvement in order to stay in your home. So Mayor Bowser started a program with our Department of Aging, for short, and that allows more seniors to stay in their home and be a vibrant or part of our vibrant community. So we're very excited about that. And then another program that we have, if you're a renter but you want to be a homeowner, is our Housing Payment Assistance Program, HPAP. What that allows you to do is it gives you down payment support so that you can buy your first home. So we're really, by investing in housing, investing in our residents, investing in each and every one of you. So then there's the creation of jobs. And this is really important because the pandemic has had a huge economic impact on the District of Columbia, just as it has nationally and globally. And what we see is that the District of Columbia had about 800,000 jobs when the pandemic started. The pandemic closed a lot of our businesses, and in doing so, it allowed, or it caused, about 50,000 jobs to be evaporated. Now we need to bring those jobs back, and we also need to focus on how we keep the jobs that we do have. And so what we did was created grant programs in order to provide needed relief to businesses so that they can sustain their employees. That is a way that we actually make sure that more of our residents can stay in DC and thrive in DC. So I want to make sure that when you think about investing in housing, in economic development, it's again an investment in you. Now, I don't have music as a previous deputy mayor had, but I do have the story of Maya. Maya is 15 years old. She lives in Ivy City, and she testified at my council hearing earlier this week. And in that testimony, she talked about a site that DemPed has that will actually have a community center to be built in a school that is now dilapidated. We also have affordable housing to be built on that site, as well as other community uses like green space. Now, Maya wanted to make sure that this summer, she and her friends have green space and play space on that site. So we're going to make sure that happens because of investments in housing. We're also going to make sure that we bring back that community center or that old school to be a community center. That's what investing in housing does. And when Maya grows up, hopefully she'll have the opportunity to go to college, to succeed and getting a career, and then she's going to want a place to live. And by the time she's ready to do that, we'll have new housing options right in the neighborhood that she grew up in. So when you invest in housing, you're investing in Maya, you're investing in our residents. So I ask you to do that today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayors, for your fantastic pitches. And now is the exciting time where we get to question and answer, and we get to hear from you all directly of your budget priorities, your budget questions for Mayor Bowser and the administration. I also want to remind you that you can go now live to budget.dc.gov to allocate your $100 for the $100 game. You've heard their great pitches, so now it's your turn to allocate those dollars out. So we're also going to want to thank everybody that submitted your video questions to us at budget@dc.gov. We received dozens of questions from residents all across the city, and we're going to get started for our question and answer portion of the program with our first video question.
Hello, my name is Jessica Smith, and I am 50. I believe should be considered is having impeccably affordable housing for Black and brown people of Washington, D.C. Mayor Bowser, I know you are committed to affordable housing, but how can we create pathways to the middle class to home ownership through the affordable housing program?
Well, thank you for that question, and I think we've talked a little bit already today about our administration's commitment to building affordable housing. I've said frequently, and you heard John today amplify, how important it is that we add units of housing across income spectrums, across all 8 wards of the District of Columbia. We know in doing that, we make homes affordable for people who have incomes that are 30% or less of the AMI, to middle income people as well. And it is important that we're able to attract and keep people living in our city who span those incomes. I've also said frequently the importance home ownership has had in my own life in building wealth and allowing me and people who are just like me, born and raised in the city, not wealthy, but hardworking, and able to buy a home and build wealth. That's why we've been so very committed to home ownership programs through HPAP and another program we have for our own employees in DC government. EHAP is what it is called. And we invest with partners and nonprofit partners in making sure that we have financial and home counseling services available for people who want to buy homes. Now, we have also something to, what's the word that, how do I want to say? We have to tackle this notion that you can't afford to live in DC, because I hear that too much. And another part of our job, another part of everyone who's here, from DMPED to public safety, is to make sure that every neighborhood in DC provides safety and opportunity and transportation and grocery and great schools and great parks. So people in Washington, D.C. know that you can look to a lot of neighborhoods across our city and find an affordable home. And that's another part that we don't talk about enough. The way that we make housing more affordable is to make more DC neighborhoods have all of the amenities that I just described. And that's why it's so hard to build these budgets, because ultimately that's what we're going for. Every neighborhood in our city being safe and clean and having great amenities, including great housing stock. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go to the phones now. I want to remind everyone you can dial in 844-881-1314 and press 0 to ask your questions. That number is also on your screen right now, so we hope that you'll dial in so we can get to some of your questions. We're going to go first to Christine in Ward 8. Christine, your line should be unmuted.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Christine.
Hi, my name is Christy Gardner. I'm a senior citizen with a disability, and I live in Ward 8. I need assistance with my rent. I was recently unemployed. I applied for the insurance, but it has not. It's been almost 3 weeks. Haven't heard a response. In addition, I'm on the steering committee. We're trying to open up a community grocery cooperative in Ward 8 or Ward 7. And we wanted to know if we can get some funds to help us with this endeavor.
Okay, Christy, thank you for that question. And I am sorry that you are experiencing unemployment. Too many of our residents have been impacted by unemployment due to COVID. And we have had unprecedented claims on our unemployment fund and system. And we're working very hard every day to make sure that we are responding as quickly as possible to the claims that we're getting. So we're going to keep working on that. But you also mentioned something that's very important to us to talk about, and that is how people can get assistance to pay their rent and to pay their utilities. And so we have several programs that are on the street now, and both of these programs are being underutilized. So I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Farchicchio to talk about the emergency rental assistance programs that are available through DHCD, and also utility assistance that is available.
Thanks, Mayor. So there are a couple programs that I want to walk through. One is, and all of this information actually, can be found at coronavirus.dc.gov /rent. So I'll go through a couple of the programs. One is the Coronavirus Housing Assistance Program. That is for our residents. If you're behind on the rent, look to that program. It was a program that Mayor Bowser and the Department of Housing and Community Development sent up during the pandemic in order to help those who were impacted by the pandemic, like our caller. And then also there's another program that is a program that has existed before the pandemic and continues to be one that we invest in, and that is the emergency or the ERAP, which is an emergency housing assistance. That program also has some capacity, so I ask the caller to go to coronavirus.dc.gov /rent and see if either one of those programs is right for them. And then if you're behind on utilities, there's actually a program that Deputy Mayor Babers would tell us about in the Department of Energy and the Environment. It's called LIHEAP. LIHEAP actually helps you pay those utility bills that may be piling up. And then I also was excited, today you'll see us talk about DC Hope a lot. And HOPE stands for Health, Opportunity, Prosperity, and Equity. And you asked about how a food cooperative can get funding from the district in order to set up in Ward 8. We're really excited about the work that Mayor Bowser has done and her continued commitment to creating more food access points in Wards 7 and 8. And DEMPED, the agency that I help lead, has a solicitation for 2 programs that you should know about. The Neighborhood Prosperity Fund, which actually allows us to invest in retail and food access points in neighborhoods like yours, and Nourish DC. Nourish DC is actually a new program where we're actually going to have an entity that will help food collaboratives and others who maybe aren't ready to go into a retail space or a restaurant space, but actually need technical assistance to make their business more viable. That program is another grant opportunity that we have for an entity to lead. So there's 2 programs in DEMPED right now that help us address food access, and the application is actually open now and open until March 15th. That's the Neighborhood Prosperity Fund and Nourish DC. So I hope you'll go to demped.dc.gov and go to our grant opportunities page for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And let me also remind Christy that at coronavirus.dc.gov /rent, you can find links to the programs that John just mentioned for rental assistance. I want to spend another second on that because a lot of our residents recognize that there is a moratorium on evictions and on utility shut-offs, and rightly so, because a lot of people are experiencing real financial hardship. I should remind you, though, if you are able to pay, you should pay. And if you're not able to pay, you should be applying for assistance. And I want to emphasize that because when these moratoriums go away, everybody will be applying at the same time. And then we will be experiencing wait times. So if you know you cannot pay, please go to coronavirus.dc.gov /rent and get the ball rolling because there is help for you.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go to our next question on the phone. Arshia from Ward 6, your line is unmuted.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks very much for hosting this event. It's nice to be able to take part in the city budget, obviously, which is vital. Question I have pertains to the Public Safety and Justice Department of the city. I've been a resident of DC for about 8 years, and I've just noticed that the alarming rate of gun violence in the city, obviously, that was mentioned before, and just general crime that's gone on, and not even just at night, but in broad daylight, and wanted to know specifically what the city and the Public Safety and Justice Department is going to do to try and contain the increasing level of gun violence, because it does impact, obviously, residents, but also the economic activity, people living here, people who want to live here, and take part in the city may not feel so safe, and they want to move elsewhere. So I'd really love to hear your feedback.
Well, thank you for that question, and I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Geldhart to talk with some specificity about our new block-by-block initiative. First of all, I agree with you that we have an unacceptable level of gun violence in our city, especially when you consider that over several years we've seen the actual number of violent crimes go down. What we've seen go up over the last several years is the number of shots fired and the number of people killed. What we know through our analysis is that we can link over 40% of gun violence in our city to 151 blocks in our city. So a specific and concentrated problem with also a small number of people. So we, in addition to all of the work that we do in law enforcement, are committed to other programs to prevent violence and to make sure that people who are interested in help are getting the help that the whole of government can provide. Just this week, we launched a program called Block by Block that will be led by the DIM PSJ cluster, including a new gun violence director that I've appointed. Deputy Mayor Geldhart.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for the question. This gets right back to where I started, and thanks to the mayor and her bold approach to this, we're actually going to and have stood up a gun violence emergency operations center, which is taking the approach the mayor just mentioned in doing a block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood view of the people and the places that are there that need the services of the city so that we can start to stem that tide. We know that the public safety and criminal justice system is an ecosystem, and we know that that starts with the people in the areas where they are. And as the mayor said, we did a very in-depth analysis, not only found that 151 blocks were responsible for about 41% of the gun violence that we're seeing, but it's also a small amount of people that are actually causing the most amount of gun violence in the city. So we need to focus our resources, many of them which are out in the community now, but bring them together in a place where we can function together and better provide those services for trauma, for housing, for jobs, for job training, all of those things that we can offer to folks to have off-ramps from that cycle of violence that is out there. And that's that block-by-block approach. We started in historic Anacostia, which is not necessarily the most highly violent area, but it is definitely an area where we know that we can bring better services to that community to help stem the tide. And we'll be bringing it from there out to the other 151 blocks throughout the city in the coming months, and putting these city services and your dollars to good work to try to get folks off of that ramp or off of that cycle of violence that they're on and into off-ramps, into programs and services that can help stem that tide and help us in our criminal justice system than just going out and trying to arrest everybody that's doing this, because we know that that's not going to be the complete solution, nor is it the solution. So that's what we're working on now. I applaud the mayor, and I thank her for giving me the opportunity to lead this with Director Harley Harper, who's our gun violence director, and get this stood up and get this opportunity moving throughout the city so we can help the most people that we can. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We're going to go to our next phone question. This is from Douglas in Ward 4. Douglas, your line is unmuted.
Thank you. I'm interested in having funded better bus service from Anacostia to the U Street corridor. Over the last 10 years, I was a project manager for Metro. Before that, I worked for DDOT for 30 years. And then pushed for these projects, and the mayor supported them in other quarters, 14th Street, 16th Street. But I've heard from the people of Anacostia who say they need to get cross town to schools and employment and so on in the U Street corridor. So I just want to know, what is it possible to fund this service after 10 years? Because the people in Anacostia say no one's listening to them. But when I was a project manager, I said I'm going to keep pushing for it. So I've been doing it for 10 years.
Well, thank you for that question, and it sounds like a route that we have analyzed. I don't know if Jenny or Lucinda remembers it specifically, but if I recall correctly, it's the 90 or 91 that you may be referring to as a new route and an express route. And so I think the caller knows, I think I know him well, that we are committed to bus service and making sure that bus service has the frequency and reliability that residents need. So let me turn to Lucinda.
Douglas, I want to thank you for your call, and I just want to share with you that the Department of Transportation just last week gave a bus priority program presentation to the city administrator where we advocated for additional funding to expand our bus program. Now, we didn't specifically talk about routes, but I know that the Anacostia to U Street is something that we do realize we need to take a look at it. I know you know that funding is limited, which is why I'm trying to advocate for more funding for transportation services, but that's definitely a route that we will take a look at again because we do know that bus service is where our priority should be in the city.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do want to remind everyone again, if you have questions and want to get into the question queue, you can dial 844-881-1314, then press 0 to be entered into the question queue. We're actually going to go to a video question next, and then we'll get back to our phone callers. So we'll go to our next video question.
Hello, my name is Kim Stokes. I'm a resident of Ward 6 in Washington, D.C. My question for you all today is about the budget for education. My child is a second grader here in DC Public Schools, and there is not enough space in her school to accommodate all of the children who want to return, as well as many teachers who want to return. And we don't expect this to change because of the CDC guidelines that were just issued requiring 6 feet of space between children. We want to keep our kids and our teachers safe, but we also want kids to be back in school, and we just don't have the space at our school and many other schools, nor the staffing to support it. What can you do to allocate more money to education to help support this immediate need? Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the caller for her question, and I'm not sure that the question is how do we keep people safe given COVID restrictions. And let me just remind everyone that our posture as it relates to COVID is certainly informed by CDC recommendations, but the DC Department of Health is the regulator and provides the final recommendations to me for how we operate during COVID. So we've been closely aligned with a lot of the CDC recommendations. We've been ahead of many of them, but we will make the decisions about what is best for DC. And I'm also, I'm heartened to hear this question as well, because in the beginning of February, Deputy Mayor Khan, I'm going to turn to you in a second, we worked very hard for many months to make sure that we were in a position, the first really in our region, to open our schools. And we did so with an agreement with our teachers, and we did so after having made tens of millions of dollars of investments in our buildings. We do, in many schools, have capacity. we have capacity both physically and with our staffing to have more students in classrooms. I think we're at about 9,600 students in our classrooms, and we can accommodate up to 15,000. Having said that, you heard from one school where that's not the case. So we're going to continue to work on a space, including having DCPS investigate if we have additional spaces that can be used where we have parent demand exceed the available space in the building. And even then, we're talking about half of our students because that's about how much DCPS has. The other half are going to public charter schools. And we know that we have another set of options that are being available through our public charter schools. I will continue to work with the public charter school sector as well as Deputy Mayor Kine does on a weekly basis to make sure that they too have more aggressive plans to get kids back in school. Deputy Mayor Kine.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to thank the caller for her question. We have worked tirelessly under the mayor's leadership, as you're aware, to really accomplish two goals. One is to get more and more of our students back learning in person, because we know that's where they learn best. And secondly, to make sure we're doing that extremely safely. And we have set extremely high standards for safety and health protocols under the leadership and guidance of DC Health. As the mayor mentioned, we continue to reevaluate those in terms of the cohort sizing and the spacing in consultation with our federal partners. And so we take your question extremely seriously, and we are not going to make any move without DC Health sharing with us that it is safe to do so. My one additional comment to your specific question is, in DCPS, as the Chancellor recently announced, we have very much adopted a school-by-school program based on the specific needs of the students in those schools and the desires of those families. And so each school developed their own reopening plan, which allocated a certain amount of space in the building based on the needs of the students. He's just announced some additional funding that will be available for schools to consider even more creative options to some space constraints, including the use of additional indoor space and also the potential for outdoor spaces to be utilized if that's feasible. And so we continue to push within DCPS and across the charter sector on this reopening question to get more students back in school.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We're going to go to the phone for our next question. Garrett Williams in Ward 5, your line is unmuted.
Hello, good morning, Mayor Bowser, and thank you for this forum. My name is Jared Williams, and I'm a teacher in Northeast DC, and I work with a coalition called DEC, DC Education Coalition for Change. Over the past 2 years, we have advocated for safe passage programs that would hire trusted adults to serve as boots on the ground in key safe passage areas across the city. We anticipate such a program to cost around $2.5 million. Will you fund such a program through your budget or through also federal DC funding? And if not, what will you do to ensure that our students are traveling safely to and from school?
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for serving our kids in schools. And I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Kine to talk about our safe passage work.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. We're very familiar with DEC, and we're really proud to be good listeners and to learn from all of the research that you do. The mayor has asked us to take safe passage extremely seriously, and we've done quite a lot, as you'll be aware, over the past few years to ensure our students are safe traveling to and from school. We have piloted a number of boots on the ground programs, as you're describing, because we know the evidence says that they are extremely successful and helpful for our students. We have stood up a series of safe spots programs in our priority safe passage areas where businesses and houses of worship can be safe harbors for students who are feeling unsafe. We've provided a lot of training to school staff about effective ways to help move students in and out of buildings and to get them safely to transportation. We've worked very closely with our excellent partners at WMATA and MPD to ensure the officers and public safety personnel interacting with students are doing so with conflict resolution and de-escalation in mind as a first order. And we continue to look for ways to provide the kinds of additional funding for services that you're describing. So we have done a lot and know that we have more work to do to ensure our kids are safe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have time for just a few more questions and want to remind everyone the number on your line if you want to get into the question queue. We're going to go to our next video question.
Hi, I'm Rahana Mohammed, Ward 2 resident. My question is, how is the FY22 budget going to address the needs of LGBTQ people and specifically trans women of color in meeting basic needs and ending homelessness? Thank you.
And thank you for that question. And we have certainly gathered a lot of feedback from the LGBTQ community this budget season and last budget season, some very specific advocacy. And I think that you are right to point out one of the big areas of concern for us, and that's housing, especially housing for young people, shelter, transitional spaces. We've also heard quite a lot about job placement, I think is another big component of the advocacy that we've gotten. So our approach is to look at all of our agencies in the HHS cluster. I should also mention we have gotten a lot of advocacy around seniors and senior services as well. So we continue to look at that, look at what the agencies have done and what more we can do to keep people safe. Let me say too, for our transgender residents, not only is housing and jobs and to help with job placement a serious concern for us, but basic safety. And our police department, all of our community prosecutors take very seriously getting reports and providing help for transgender residents. And we want to make sure people know that they are safe in calling us and seeking help, and we'll continue to do that. So that's a long answer to say that we continue to formulate our FY22 budget with those goals in mind.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go next to Lauren Rogers from Ward 5 on the phone. Lauren, your line is unmuted.
Good morning. Mayor Bowser, first I want to thank you for your stellar leadership during this crisis. It has been really a comfort to know that you are at the helm in this situation, and I just want to appreciate you and all of your staff.
Thank you.
And secondly, I just want to ask, I live in an older part of the city in Woodridge. I'm the ANC Commissioner 5CO2, and we've experienced some increasingly catastrophic flooding in our area as the storms get more and more drastic due to climate change, and our sewer system is not keeping up, and our drainage is not keeping up with the increased volume of the storms. How can we ensure that in the older sections of the city we are continuing to update and retrofit our infrastructure so that we can keep up with the kind of growing impact of storms and climate change?
Well, thank you for that question, Commissioner. I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Babers to respond with some specifics, but I will say we had quite a number of my team members in the last year responded to 2 communities recently because of flooding with DC Water to talk about some historic problems and all of the things that DC Water can do to help prevent and or help homeowners and residents with additional equipment. And we were also instrumental in making sure that there was some immediate assistance provided. So let me turn to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your question. So as you know, the incident that the mayor was speaking of was on September 10th of 2020 when we had a storm of the century. The type of water that we received in the rain in 35 minutes was more rain than we would receive over 100 years, according to DC Water. And so even we have one of the most sophisticated infrastructures as it relates to DC Water in our sewer system. And DC Water is currently doing a tunneling project that will also provide us with additional capacity. But unfortunately, with climate change, we're probably not going to be able to address this totally with increase in our infrastructure. What we're going to also need to do is we're going to need to also address some of the aspects of climate change, which is why we're so pleased that President Biden recently indicated that the United States would rejoin the Paris Accord. We take climate change and everything we can do for our environment very seriously. Our Department of Energy and Environment is investing in doing research and partnering with several environmental entities to see what can we do to address climate change in our particular area. We're partnering with Maryland and Virginia because, of course, we are the tri-region, but we are recognizing that we're going to have even more of these situations. The DC Water has a back valve program that you can go to their website and you can get more information about that will help individuals who are living in flood-prone areas to prevent any basement flooding. It'll prevent the water from backing up in there. So I would encourage anyone that believes they are in an area that now they see as prone to flooding to take advantage of that back valve program through DC Water. But we will continue to look at the flooding areas and see what needs to be done to address those issues.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have time for just one more question, and I do want to remind everyone we're about to let everyone know the results of the $100 game. So if you've not finished your allotment of your $100, please do so as soon as possible, because we're going to get to that after this final question. So Sadia from Ward 7, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Sadia Kawal from Ward 7, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm here for providing inputs and feedback. I have two questions. One is very specifically on the mayor's priorities for fiscal year 2022 in terms of the extension of the streetcar project to Bunning Road Metro Station, which is part of the overall Bunning Road reconstruction project, and how the government is ensuring that excuse me, the funding is available and that remains a priority and not reallocated for other projects. And let me ask second question. And my second question is specifically again in Ward 7, what the DC government priorities are for supporting new businesses, specifically startups and entrepreneurs. Myself looking for funding opportunities for a couple of years, I have noticed a lot of opportunities here come for the existing businesses and have very stringent requirements. But young people like me who are educated and want to start and bring business within Ward 7 communities don't have more opportunities to get seed funding for investing in the community. So I would appreciate if this becomes a priority for a lot of growing population in DC who want to really bring prosperity and income in Ward 7 and 8. So I would appreciate your.
Well, thank you, Satya, for that question. Let me start with streetcar and ask Deputy Mayor Babers to talk about that.
Yes, thank you so much for that question as it relates to streetcar. So the extension of the streetcar is currently still in the budget, and we are continuing to work on that. The Department of Transportation continues to work on that extension, and we continue to have conversation with the mayor and the city administrator as to how does the streetcar fit into our future mobility plans, because we want to take a holistic look at all of our transportation opportunities. But currently, it still is in the budget. It still is on track.
On track, so to speak, yes. I like that one. But let me just amplify what Lucinda says. Not only is it currently in the budget, it's going to be in the budget to complete the terminus on the Ward 7 side over to where it starts on H Street. What has changed is the western terminus. And we continue to look at how far a streetcar would go west from Union Station. But it connects, and we're also budgeting, and we're very bullish about the transformation of K Street with the K Street Transitway. We think with that transformation, the connection via streetcar to an improved K Street Transitway will make the east-west travel from Ward 7 all the way to Georgetown complete. I think the further question, I see Deputy Mayor Falchicchio wants to respond to your question about funding for startup entrepreneurs. And I noticed, Satya, you didn't say what business you were interested in, but we will talk a little bit about what we have for startups.
Well, and I'd love to connect with you to talk about some of these resources. For current businesses, throughout the pandemic, we wanted to make sure that those businesses that had to close or were restricted, that we had funding available. But the caller brings up a really important question, which is if we're really going to be investing in hope, in health opportunity, prosperity, and equity, we have to also find ways for folks to start businesses and to hopefully make those successful so that they build wealth. And so I mentioned one of the programs that we have. If you were interested in a food-related program, or food-related business, I should say, then you should look at our Nourish DC grant program, which is on DCgov, and look at the grant opportunities. Another one, though, if you're interested in being a maker. So in the pandemic, we've had businesses pop up or pivot to making things like masks or hand sanitizers. We have a grant program, the first that we've tried, for light manufacturing. So if you're interested in being a maker and actually making your goods in DC, we actually have a new grant program. It's part of what we call DC Leaf, which is sort of our umbrella for a number of programs, for the Neighborhood Prosperity Fund, for the Nourish DC, and then also for our light manufacturing, which is a new grant. So there's plenty of opportunity for you. Reach out to us at DemPed and the Department of Small and Local Business, because we want to make sure that DC residents have an opportunity to become entrepreneurs and, again, find their pathway to the middle class and ultimately build wealth.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now is the time where we let you know the results of the $100 game. One data statistic I want to let the mayor know about is over 70% of those that participated today said this was their first budget engagement forum. So we thank you for joining us for your first forum if this was your first time, and we'll let you know about the allocations now. Let me just get my numbers up here for y'all. I want to remind everyone you can also go to budget.dc.gov at any time to make sure that you can still fill out the game if you haven't. Share your budget priorities with us directly and continue to watch the forum, rewatch the forum as well. So in order of receiving the most allocation on average, housing led the way. Yeah, good job. Followed by education, health, transportation, public safety, and number one in my heart, internal services. So again, we want to thank you all so much for participating, for watching our Deputy Mayor pitches, and want to remind you, you can go to budget.dc.gov to continue to fill out and share your priorities. You can also send us your questions to budget@dc.gov, as well as send us any other video questions that you would like to have answered as well. So to close us out, I'm going to give it to Mayor Bowser.
Thank you, Tomas, and I want to thank you and our entire communications team for working with the deputy mayors, working with the budget office, working with the city administrator for putting this week's forum together. We, of course, started, as we always do, with a senior budget town hall that we do over the telephone, and we've had 2 of these events today. Like Kevin said earlier, we miss seeing everybody in person, but I'm glad still that thousands of people were able to participate in learning about our budget process, learning how we invested last year, and hearing today from people who are concerned from everything from housing to public safety to how you start and support a business, and we've been able to hear from people from all 8 wards. So I want to thank you. I want to let you know that we take your feedback very seriously. It has happened in, I think, each budget engagement forum that an idea has percolated to the top that we may have been not sure would make it in the budget, but because of your ideas and your good thoughts, it caused us to look at them more deeply, and they made the budget. So we will continue our process. Know that with every budget, I recognize that the budget reflects our values as a city. It reflects the available resources that we have. And this year, it's even more different because it will reflect the relief that we have to provide because of COVID and the investments that we'll need to make to bring our city back, or like I like to say, the comeback. And so that's what all of the things that this budget will represent. The members of the council will receive our budget, and then they will engage in yet another public engagement process in the form of hearings. And at the end of the day, they'll make a vote. They'll submit it to me for my signature, and we will have our 25th balanced budget. I want to remind everybody that we are still fighting this global pandemic. We're not through with it yet. So stay vigilant, stay safe, continue to wear your mask, social distance, practice good hygiene, avoid gatherings, and when it's your turn, get vaccinated. Thank you, DC.